My private detective told me that Steve was a man of habit, so I joined the evening happy hour gathering at a fancy bar in downtown Charlotte, North Carolina, where Steve often frequented at 5:15 p.m. I knew he would join his friends within the next few minutes. I wasn't nervous about the confrontation that would soon begin after his arrival or about the new direction my life was taking, because I had come to terms with my new reality very quickly. In less than a week, I must admit, a glass of bourbon helped me relax. I was scanning the bar counter while the lounge around me filled with people when I looked into the long mirror behind the rows of drinks and spotted Steve. He had joined his friends, and the waitress had already placed a tall glass of beer in front of him. Steve is a tall and handsome man. I would have guessed he was 10 years younger than my 52 years. He stands no taller than 180 centimeters, is fit, and looks athletic. He has blonde hair, blue eyes, and classic, chiseled features. I could understand why my wife, Lori, was drawn to him during her frequent business trips to the corporate office in Charlotte. My private detective was able to gather the basics. Steve had joined the company 2 years earlier. He was the director of the marketing department and held a position roughly equivalent to Lori's in the sales department. They worked together on many projects and often traveled to meet clients. I didn't hire a private detective for a thorough investigation because the main evidence was provided by Steve and Lori themselves. After finishing my drink, I ordered a second one and paid the bill. I crossed the room and stood next to their table, looking at the 5 men and 2 women who were part of Steve's group. "Hi, Steve. I'm Chris Harrington, Lori's husband. I hope we can find a private place to talk." At first, Steve looked confused. He had a smile on his face, but his eyes showed deep concern. Chris. Hi. Nice to meet you. What are you doing in Charlotte?" "I flew in to have a private conversation with you." "Well, I'm here with friends. Do you think we could meet some other time?" I glanced around the room. It was filling up quickly, and nodded toward an empty booth at the end of the hall. "All I need is 10 minutes. I'll take that booth over there." As I walked away from Steve's table, I saw him finish his beer and order another. When he joined me a few minutes later, he looked troubled. "I can't imagine why you flew to North Carolina just to talk to me. It would have been much easier to call." "I wanted to meet the man who had a sexual relationship with my wife." My quick and direct response left Steve speechless before he could reply. That's not what you think." I laughed. "It's exactly what I think. I managed to access the cloud server where you and Lori hid the videos. I now have copies of all 16. I didn't think Steve could be more surprised. "You have those copies?" Instead of answering, I asked, "How long has this been going on?" "I'm not sure exactly. The 4 of us were on a business trip to Allied Corp in Cleveland. I think it was a little over a year ago. Lori's computer battery died, so I lent her mine. I don't know how it happened, but she found a fetish site I frequently visit." "Well, Steve, that shows how foolish I am. I thought the affair had been going on for 6 to 8 months." Steve lowered his head. "For a while, it wasn't physical. Lori was intrigued, so we talked and emailed about it before. The rest was left unsaid." Neither of us spoke as we gathered our thoughts. "Chris, she loves you. You know that, don't you?" I nodded in agreement. "I love her too. That's why the divorce will be so hard." Steve almost shouted. "You can't be serious. You're going to divorce her? Over this?" "I deserve better than a lying cheater." I groaned. "I want to call her a crap, but I'm not sure if that's fair. But this definitely warrants a divorce." An unusually long silence settled over the table until Steve finally asked, "Chris, what are you going to do with the videos?" "Well, I don't want to ruin Lori's life." Suddenly, I felt an overwhelming exhaustion and wanted nothing more than to leave the bar. "Steve, I'm going to go because I have an early flight home tomorrow. Lori flew to Philadelphia this morning and will be back home tomorrow afternoon. That's when I'll talk to her." I looked Steve in the eye. "Don't you dare say a single damn word to Lori, you sick piece of crap. I'll know if you do, and I'll send those videos to everyone you know." I swallowed the last sip of whiskey, slammed the glass on the table, and headed back to my hotel. "Chris." As new empty nesters, Lori and I had promised each other to take 2 weeks of vacation together every year. For the upcoming fall break, we plan to fly to Vancouver, and we're looking forward to eating and drinking our way south along the Pacific coast to San Francisco, with stops in Seattle and Portland along the way. It was Friday, and I had just booked a car for our vacation, as well as arranged for first-class flights to Vancouver and home from San Francisco. While booking the hotel room, I discovered the first hints of Lori's affair. Lori and I had traveled a lot for business. We had made it a habit to use accumulated airline miles to book our flights, hotel points for our stays, and car rental points for our vacations. These bonus points were one of the few perks of business travel, and they covered our vacation expenses. For every previous vacation, we always had enough points to cover these expenses, so I was surprised when I calculated that for the upcoming trip, we would have to pay for 3 or 4 nights in a hotel. And that made no sense. My travels totaled exactly 120 nights, and I assumed Lori had been away for her usual 75 nights. More than enough to cover 12 hotel nights as we traveled along the Pacific coast. Since each of us frequently traveled, Lori and I decided it would be wise to share our account information in case of an emergency while the other was away. We gave each other access to our calendars, bank accounts, credit cards, and other personal online information because we loved and trusted each other. We had no secrets. After I opened Lori's calendar and reviewed her travel itinerary from last year, I confirmed that she had been away for 72 nights. Then I logged into her hotel account and discovered that she had stayed in a hotel for only 51 nights. A knot formed in my stomach as I wondered where Lori had spent the remaining 21 nights. By comparing her calendar with the data from her hotel account, I was able to determine that she hadn't booked any hotel rooms when she visited her corporate office in Charlotte. The knot in my stomach tightened even more, and I thought I was going to be sick. For the first time in almost 28 years of marriage, I wondered if Lori had started an affair. I was a linear thinker and didn't shy away from facing unpleasant situations, but I wasn't prepared to continue the investigation. Instead, I informed my personal assistant of my intentions and left the office. And I need to go to the gym for my morning workout. I changed in the company locker room, ran 3 kilometers to the nearest gym, lifted weights for 45 minutes, and then returned to work. After quickly showering and changing, I walked past and on my way back to my office. Chris, you have a few calls to return, and some personal issues have come up. I need an hour or so to sort things out. Is that why you went to the gym so early? When I nodded affirmatively, she continued, Chris, is there anything I can do? As I shook my head, passing by her and closing the door to my office, I assumed and was surprised by the depth of my sadness. All the tension immediately returned as soon as I sat down at my desk, and when my phone rang a second later, I was furious. And I just told you I need an hour. Sorry. Jim wants to talk to you. He asked me to interrupt you. Jim and I had been friends and colleagues throughout my entire career. He's the president of the company and the son of its founder. I followed him up the corporate ladder and became his right-hand man and the vice president of sales and marketing. I sighed, sorry for yelling at you, and put him through. After I answered, Jim asked, what's going on? Why aren't you returning calls? I need an hour, Jim. Can I come by at 11:30? It won't work. I'm calling an urgent meeting about the Watson situation, and I need your input. I was angry, really angry, and felt like I was about to explode as I pleaded with him. Jim, please give me until 11:30. I need to take care of something. There was a tense silence on the other end of the line, and then Jim coldly agreed. See you at 11:30. I continued my investigation, feeling a tight knot forming inside me. Each of our companies used the same software for filing online expense reports, so I accessed Lori's account and reviewed all her available travel expense reports for the past 24 months. The vast majority of Lori's trips were east of the Mississippi. About a third of her business trips were to her company's headquarters in Charlotte, with the rest to other cities. According to Lori's expense reports, the cost of hotel stays had been charged to her corporate card for all trips, up until 8 months ago. At that point, Hotel charges were applied for all trips except the ones to Charlotte. Reviewing the information a second time, I thought to myself, this can't be happening. My world was falling apart. Then, just as quickly, a simple explanation came to mind. I actually laughed in relief and scolded myself for thinking so poorly of my best friend, my wife. Many companies have been forced to cut costs. In an effort to control employee lodging expenses for trips to corporate headquarters, some companies began paying directly for hotel stays at a discounted rate and saving the points to use for future employee travel. I thought, that must be what happened with Lori's hotel stays. I pondered this for a few minutes, then opened the contacts file on my computer. I was looking for the name of the guy in Lori's finance group. I had 46 contacts from people I had met through Lori's work. Finally, I found the number for the CFO, Sam Jennings, dialed his number, and left a voicemail. Sam, this is Chris Harrington, Lori's husband. We met a couple of times at company events. I'm reaching out to finance specialists at various companies to see if they're changing their policies to save a few dollars by directly paying for hotel accommodations. Our finance department is considering this change, but I'm against it because I want my employees to benefit from the hotel points. I'd appreciate it if you could give me a call back. I left my office number and then slowly headed to Jim's office for our meeting. When the meeting began, Jim gave me a questioning look, but I just shrugged. 20 minutes later, the sales, marketing, finance, and operations departments had agreed on how to resolve the week-long issue with the Watson brothers, one of our oldest clients. When the meeting ended, Jim's voice had a note of irritation. Stick around, Chris. After the room was cleared and the door closed, Jim asked, what the hell is going on? I sighed, and Jim gave me a moment to collect my thoughts. My blood pressure is just below heart attack level, but barely. I'm still dealing with some things. Business or personal? It has nothing to do with business. Is it about the kids? By that time, I was already on edge, so I just shook my head and waited a few moments. It's about Lori. An hour ago, I was sure she was having an affair. Now I feel more than foolish because it seems I've figured out what the problem is. I'm just waiting for a confirming phone call. Jim smirked and shook his head. You're an idiot. Lori loves you to death and would never cheat on you. So stop thinking nonsense and get the hell out of here. Anne's worried expression melted into a smile when she saw me smiling as I walked past her desk. Welcome back to the land of the living, Chris. After checking for any urgent messages, I pressed play to retrieve my voicemail. Sam Jennings had called me back. Hi, Chris. Good to hear from you. We haven't seriously considered direct payments and saving bonus points yet. I looked into it, and we would save about $5,000 a year, but on the other hand, I've read that it could cost us 10 times more in employee morale. I agree with that. It's a bad idea. Hope this helps. As Sam finished saying, hope this helps, the photo of Lori on my desk flew across the room and shattered against the wall. As I was packing up my computer into my briefcase and stood in my office doorway, glancing from the broken photo on the floor to me and back again. And I'm taking the rest of the day off. Only call me if it's absolutely necessary. If Lori calls, tell her I'm in a meeting and can't be disturbed. I stepped out without waiting for a response. Lori. There was no doubt that my love life was exceptional. Chris and I were still intimate 3 or 4 times a week, and I would often experience multiple moments of pleasure during each encounter. Intimate moments played a significant role in our closeness. After Chris would slowly explore my body, we often moved into a more connected interaction. I enjoyed his touch, especially when he focused on my most sensitive areas. I loved how his skillful movements heightened my pleasure. Most of the time after this, Chris would guide me into a position where he could take the lead. His presence and ability to touch me always brought me to a state of pure happiness. Sometimes, to add variety, he would gently explore different areas, always being mindful of my comfort. When we were both fully engaged, he continued to follow a rhythm that matched my desires, creating an intense and memorable experience. I often found myself completely lost in the moment as we both reached mutual satisfaction. I also thought about my upcoming trip to Charlotte. I had completed most of my preparations and knew it would be an extremely busy time. I had meetings scheduled to start just 2 hours after my arrival in Charlotte, and I would be working nonstop until I returned home at noon on Friday. The only relief would be my evenings with Steve. I would spend most of the workday in meetings, including with him, and the nights, well, I knew they would be spent together. I anticipated those evenings with a mix of excitement and guilt. I was relieved that I had finally stopped feeling guilty about my nearly year-long affair with Steve. What we did together felt so wrong, yet so irresistible. I could never have involved my loving husband in the things Steve and I shared. It was a personal indulgence, satisfying a side of me I hadn't known existed. I had a wonderful life. I was proud to be a wife, mother, friend, and respected professional. But being with Steve allowed me to explore a side of myself that I kept hidden. It was a side that no one in my normal life could ever know about. I hadn't known I had such a deep, hidden desire until it was discovered by chance. The four of us were on a business trip to Cleveland. Steve had booked a room so we could work together after hours to prepare for upcoming meetings. We finished our work and Steve invited us all to dinner. Everyone was ready for food and drinks, but I realized I needed another 30 minutes to finish some work for other clients. My computer's battery was running low, so Steve lent me his laptop. I quickly finished my work, and since I wasn't particularly hungry, I decided to check Google on Steve's computer. I wanted to track a few items that were supposed to be delivered to our home. I typed Faye into the search bar, hoping FedEx would come up. Instead, I was shocked to find a long list of links related to female domination. I was naive and didn't fully understand what female domination was, so I clicked on the first link. The videos were disturbing, but I found myself watching clip after clip where women dominated and humiliated men. I couldn't believe Steve watched this kind of content. Initially, I was upset, but after watching several clips, I found myself unexpectedly intrigued. I did meet up with our group for drinks, but then I made an excuse to leave. Sorry, I'm going to order room service for dinner. I had barely touched my dinner because I was engrossed in a long series of websites on my personal tablet, exploring various clips. It wasn't long before I found myself unbuttoning my blouse and letting go of my inhibitions. As I watched one scene where a mature woman assertively commanded a young, muscular actor, I couldn't help but feel a surge of conflicting emotions. I didn't understand why this excited me so much. Chris was skilled in giving oral pleasure and wasn't shy about exploring all parts of me. The sensations were always delightful, but I couldn't imagine my husband accepting the crude words coming from that actress. I finally snapped out of my daydream and realized I needed to step off the Stairmaster. Thinking about the emails I had exchanged with Steve that day, the three guys eyeing me at the gym, and the anticipation of being with Chris later that evening, I felt a strong sense of excitement. I needed to get home, take a shower, and relax before dinner. Chris. When I got home on Friday evening, it was almost 7:30, and Lori was clearly upset. "Where on earth have you been?" I answered my loving wife. "Sorry, I had some issues at work and lost track of time. I sent you half a dozen texts and left 3 messages. Why didn't you have the courtesy to respond?" "I'm really sorry. I turned off my phone and forgot to turn it back on. I was just eager to get out the door and come home." By then, Lori had calmed down a bit. "I already ate, but your dinner is probably overcooked. It won't be very good." I shrugged. "I'll go grab some Chinese food and be back in a few minutes." As I left, Lori started to say something just as the door closed, but I didn't catch what it was. When I returned, I ate in my home office and tackled some work that had come in during the afternoon, but mostly, I was waiting for Lori to go to bed. Around 9:30, she appeared in the doorway. "Are you coming to bed soon?" "No, I need to sort out this issue. I'm not sure how long it will take." I could tell Lori wanted to say something else, but she just sighed. "Good night." I waited an hour to make sure Lori was asleep before going to her office to get her laptop. Before taking it to my office, I checked to see if her notebook was in the top center drawer of her desk. Her company required monthly password changes for accessing their VPN system, email, and many other business applications. She couldn't use the same password for 12 months, so to keep track, she wrote each new password in her notebook. It took me no more than half an hour to find what I was looking for. All the emails were in a folder labeled Steve Miller. The ones that intrigued me the most were the business-related emails. As I sifted through the personal emails spanning several months, I was shocked by the depravity and perversion of Steve and Lori. They had detailed more than 19 nights of their illicit encounters in their sexually charged emails, and each new detail felt like a fresh stab to my gut. In an email sent 2 months ago, there was an address provided by Steve. Lori mentioned that all their videos were saved on this secure, secret site and were password protected. Fortunately, Steve had included the password. When I accessed the site, I had a pretty good idea of what I would see because their constant emails were filled with absurd details. However, I was wrong. Seeing my wife as the main character in every video was a nightmare, but now I had proof that she had betrayed me in the worst way possible. When I glanced at the clock and saw that it was 15 minutes to midnight, I was stunned by how much my life had unraveled in the 15 hours since I had tried to book a hotel room for our trip. Lori. What a miserable weekend. On Saturday, while I started my day with housework in town, Chris was busy with his usual weekly yard work. We could easily afford a lawn service, but Chris took pride in maintaining the yard himself. We usually had dinner late, but Chris kept delaying it because he had new projects in the yard. I was surprised when some materials were delivered from Lowe's at the end of the day, and as soon as they left, Butler's Nursery delivered 3 new apple trees. Chris, what's all this about? I asked. We talked about planting more apple trees in the backyard. I also want to triple the amount of hops I'm growing and add 2 new varieties for my pale ale. When do you plan to finish all this work? Today, I'm going to dig the holes for the trees and plant them first thing in the morning. Tomorrow afternoon, I'll build the trellises for the hops and plant them next week while you're away. I was irritated. Are you planning to spend any time with your wife this weekend? I'll be gone most of next week. You didn't suggest anything, so I figured you wanted to save your energy for the trip. I was taken aback by Chris's response and felt a brief pang of guilt. But knowing my secret was safe, I replied, I'm making a dinner reservation. Please be ready to leave by 6:30. An hour before our planned departure, I started to worry when Chris came into the house and complained about back pain. Chris, is there anything I can do? No. Just cancel the reservation. We can order pizza instead. Wanted to make my husband happy. I did as he asked. I ordered the pizza, picked it up, and also got one of his favorite beers, a pale ale from the local brewery. I couldn't believe what I found when I returned with the pizza and beer. Chris was in bed, sound asleep. Sunday wasn't any better. I had hoped for some of Chris's famous morning affection, but he had gotten up early an hour before I woke up and was already outside working on his projects before I even got out of bed. I complained all day, but he kept working. Talk about disappointments. That evening, he worked in the backyard until nearly 7:30, came inside, ate a tuna salad sandwich, and was snoring within 45 minutes. Ugh. Monday morning left me frustrated again. When the alarm went off, I immediately turned over to snuggle with Chris. But once again, I was shocked. The bed was empty. I jumped out of bed, threw on my robe, and went looking for Chris, but he was nowhere to be found. He simply replied to my message almost 20 minutes later. Chris, I'm at work. I wondered if Chris might be upset with me, but I couldn't recall doing anything wrong. I also thought about how we didn't have any intimacy over the weekend. I couldn't remember a single time, ever, when we didn't at least have some physical connection twice during the weekend. I decided to initiate Operation Woo My Husband and sent him a text. Lori, can't wait to be close to you tonight. An hour later, when I hadn't received a reply, I texted him again. Lori, and then you can choose between some sweet affection or a little extra fun. By midday, I was boiling with frustration because I couldn't understand why he wasn't responding. Sometimes, our best moments happened after exchanging playful messages during the day. I tried again. Lori, how about we enjoy a special dinner together tonight? I was stunned by his response. Chris, sorry, I'm going to be working late tonight. Over the next half hour, I called him 3 times, but each time it went to voicemail. As a last resort, I sent Chris one more message. Lori, I'm leaving for a 4-day trip tomorrow morning. I expect to see you home by 6 o'clock. My emotions were all over the place. I knew I would still be upset about how I'd been treated over the past few days, so I doubted there would be any intimacy when Chris got home. I decided to channel all my frustration towards Steve, so I sent him an email with some very specific instructions. I knew my words would drive him wild, and our week together would be unforgettable. I was reaching my breaking point because it was already past 6:30 and Chris still hadn't called, texted, or responded to any of my messages. I thought to myself, well, forget it. After having dinner alone, I finished packing for the week and took my briefcase and suitcase to the car. I turned on the TV and grew more and more frustrated with each show until I finally decided to go to bed. Chris would get a cold, emotionless response from me the next morning. Chris. I felt relieved when I got home and found Lori already asleep. I wasn't afraid of her anger. In fact, I was looking forward to not only confronting her face to face, but also taking control and resolving things in the coming days. It had been a very long workday. I arrived early and stayed late. Not because I wanted to, but because I had a 2-hour meeting with my newly hired divorce attorney. My friend Vanessa had given me a long list of things to do while Lori was away. We had discussed hiring a private investigator, but decided that the incriminating videos I had copied would be more than enough. I climbed into bed, likely for the last time, with my unfaithful wife and fell asleep almost immediately. Being a light sleeper by nature, I woke up on Tuesday morning an hour and a half before our alarm went off. I took a shower, got dressed, and headed to work. I was anxious on my way to the office, but I couldn't help but smile when the first message from Lori came through. I could almost feel the heat radiating from my phone. Lori, I don't know why you've been treating me so poorly, but it's unbearable. You didn't come home for dinner like I asked. You didn't wake me when you got into bed, and you left without saying goodbye. You know I'll be gone for 4 days. We need to have a serious talk when I get back on Friday night. 1 hour later. Lori, at the very least, I expected a sorry. Have a good week. What's going on with you, Chris? Between work meetings, client calls, and emails, I was also completing most of the prep work for the divorce. I had a list of our joint accounts so I could pay off and cancel credit cards and other debts on Thursday, and then we'd split whatever was left. Since the house was mine before I met Lori, I was keeping it. Aside from a small second mortgage, the house was fully paid off and belonged to me. I hired movers to help pack up Lori's personal belongings so I could take everything to her parents' garage on Thursday. The locks on the house were changed, my insurance policies had my children listed as beneficiaries, and my will and other legal documents were updated to exclude Lori. I spent a peaceful Tuesday evening planting hops in my backyard garden. It would take 2 years for the plants to mature and start producing. I had a late dinner, went to bed, and fell asleep by 9:30. Waking up early on Wednesday, I turned on my phone and saw a series of messages from Lori sent the previous evening. Lori, for the first time since we've known each other, you didn't call me while I was away. Please call me. This can't go on. We need to talk. The second message came an hour after the first. Lori, I'm begging you. Please call me. And finally, Lori, don't shut me out. Please tell me what's going on. I love you. I love you. I thought to myself, if she wants to know, I think it's time to tell her. Chris, Steve Miller, that's what's wrong. Lori, when I read Steve Miller, that's what's wrong, a wave of fear washed over me, but it quickly passed when I realized there was no way Chris could know the full extent of my affair. Given his strange behavior over the weekend, I decided to be cautious and booked a hotel room while I was in Charlotte. Although I was anxious and craving the comfort only Steve could provide, it wasn't worth risking my marriage. My future escapades could wait until my next trip to our headquarters next month. I dialed Chris's number and was pleasantly surprised when he answered. Good morning, Chris. I don't understand. What does Steve have to do with the way you've been treating me? Chris's voice sounded tired and maybe even angry as he replied. If you don't understand that your relationship with Steve is completely unacceptable, I don't know what to tell you. Unacceptable? Chris, Steve is my colleague. We interact several times a day. I know you do. Kristen continues, so I jumped in. If you're talking about our business dinners, I'm going to be upset. I know you often have business dinners with women, but that's never bothered me. I've never been concerned about your dinners with Steve or anyone else. Then why did you say Steve is the reason for your behavior? My behavior changed when I found out about your affair with Steve. My affair? Are you out of your mind? I've never had an affair with Steve or anyone else. Are you saying you've never had sex with Steve? For heaven's sake, of course, that's what I'm saying. I've never cheated on you, sweetheart. I heard Chris sobbing, which broke my already aching heart, and then his plea. Swear to me, Lori. Swear to me that you've never had an affair with Steve. Of course, I swear to you. I swear that I've never, in any way, had a sexual relationship with Steve Miller or anyone else. There was a long silence on the other end. Chris, are we okay? It took him a few seconds to respond. Yes, Lori, we're okay. I have to go because I have an early meeting. Let's talk tonight and put last week behind us. I love you. Have a good day. Chris ended the call with his usual, I love you too. I was sweating and my heart was pounding as I hung up the phone. For the life of me, I couldn't figure out why Chris thought I was having an affair. My only thought was that someone at work might have assumed Steve and I were too close or had dinner together too often. Maybe they had told Chris. Realizing I had just narrowly avoided a major issue, I vowed to limit my interactions with Steve after work. I would never spend the night at his place again and would restrict myself to one dinner with him every other visit. Chris. Seconds after Lori hung up, spinning lie after lie, I began accessing the cloud website where their videos were stored and found 3 of my favorite clips of their activities. Within 5 minutes of our conversation ending, the video clips were uploaded to Lori's social media page, and her password was changed. In the first video, Lori was wearing a leather outfit with cutouts that highlighted certain parts of her body. Steve was nude, with his hands tied behind his back. He was kneeling on a wooden floor, his head bowed down. In the video, you can hear Lori calling Steve insulting names while she punishes him. By the end of the short clip, there were marks on his back. In the second video, the couple engaged in an unconventional act. Lori was wearing a special accessory, while Steve was on all fours as she teased him. The third video, my favorite, was shot in the backyard. Steve was lying on his back nude, and Lori was standing over him. I was shocked when my wife, whom I thought I knew, did something unexpected, ordering him, "Drink this, you weakling." I wondered how many of Lori's 1,380 friends on social media would see her in action. Lori. I left my hotel room and met my colleague in the hotel lobby. My conversation with Chris had put me behind schedule. Mallory was my friend, and most people would describe her as prim and proper, so I was shocked when she asked, "What on earth is going on?" "What do you mean?" "Your social media page. Those horrible, disgusting videos with Steve." "Mallory, what are you talking about?" Mallory stared at me for what felt like an eternity. "Come with me, Lori. Right now." Mallory practically dragged me to a quiet corner of the hotel lobby, pulled out her laptop, and turned it on. She typed a few commands, and when I looked, I saw that she was on my social media page. Mallory played a video that I didn't recognize, and within the next few seconds, my world shattered. Chris. It wasn't even 10 minutes after I posted those 3 video clips on Lori's page when my son, Matthew, was the first to call. I answered, "Hey, buddy." Matt hesitantly replied, Dad? Something strange is happening with Mom's social media account. I tried calling her, but it went straight to voicemail. I cut him off. I know, Matt. I have Mom's passwords and I posted the videos. Oh man, Dad. That's harsh. I think Mom will delete the post pretty quickly. That won't be easy to do. What do you mean, Dad? After I posted the videos, I changed your mom's password. She can't access her page. You're going to divorce her, aren't you, Dad? Not long ago, I gave her a last chance to tell me the truth, but she lied. So yes, I'm going to file for divorce. Can I ask you for a couple of favors? Of course, Dad. I guess so. Call your sister. Suggest that she doesn't watch the videos and explain what's going on. And call your mom. She'll need support. I'll do that, Dad. A few moments later. What a mess. I love you, Dad. Just before noon, I had an unexpected visitor at work. I met Joe, Lori's father, in the reception area and escorted him back to my office. Chris, this is a real mess. I laughed. That's almost exactly what Matt said. Oh my God. Matt saw those videos? Joe was nearly in shock as he continued. Not only did her mother and I see them, but her children did too? There was silence for a few seconds. I'm not very tech-savvy, but Lori told her mother she can't access her account, so she can't delete the videos. Apparently, her password was changed. There was a plea in his eyes. Chris, I consider it a personal favor if you would take down the videos from social media. I've always liked Joe, and I considered both of Lori's parents my friends, so I opened Lori's page and, after a few moments, deleted the 3 files. After finishing, I looked at Joe. Can Lori stay with you when she gets back? I know we'll need to talk, but I'm still on edge, and I need some time. Joe nodded in agreement even before I finished speaking. Of course. Actually, that's probably for the best. After a few moments, he asked, do you have any longer-term plans? Yes, Joe, I do, and I think you know me well enough to understand what I have to do. Tears welled up in Joe's eyes as he admitted, yes, I divorced her too. What a terrible situation. Our meeting took place on a Saturday afternoon, 2 weeks after Lori's return. When we spoke on the phone just once, she pleaded, please, Chris, let's meet and talk. We will, but I need some time alone first. Lori kept pleading with me to talk, bombarding me with phone calls, emails, and text messages, and even involving our children, families, and friends. Finally, midway through the second week, I sent her a message. Chris, let's meet in the backyard patio at noon on Saturday so we can talk. She sent countless replies, thanking me for agreeing to meet and promising that she still loved me and wanted to repair the damage to our relationship. I read each message but didn't respond to any of them. Before Lori arrived on Saturday, I stopped by Bernie's Deli and picked up a Cobb salad for her and turkey for myself. I considered getting a pack of beer for myself and a bottle of wine for Lori, but decided that alcohol wouldn't help the conversation. Sparkling water with lime was a better choice. I set the table in the backyard and waited for Lori. When the doorbell rang at noon, I didn't get up from my seat. A short while later, after the 3rd ring, I saw Lori coming around the corner of the garage. She spotted me, walked over, and spoke her first words as she stood there, staring at me with her hands on her hips. At the very least, you could have greeted me at the front door. At the very least, you could have not been a lying cheater. Admittedly, my response was harsh, but I felt it was justified, so I continued. We can keep trading insults, or we can talk. I gestured toward the table set with her salad. After Lori sat down, we sat in awkward silence, both trying to gather our thoughts. Chris, I've been trying to think of something to say that would help you forgive me, but I can't come up with anything. I need your help. Believe it or not, Lori, I've thought about that too. I've concluded that you have nothing to say. But Chris, think about our family. It will be destroyed. Don't put that on me, Lori. You should have thought about that before you started your affair. I didn't ask for this, and I don't deserve this. I'm just cleaning up the mess you made. I know it sounds cliche, but it was never about love. It was just, I don't know what it was. I'm so ashamed. 8 months later, Lori and I were divorced. We still see each other occasionally when we gather at one of the children's homes. We're friendly, and I suspect Lori still hopes for more, but that's not going to happen. Every time I start to feel sympathy for Lori, I remember that video where she bends over Steve's dining table, holding his face between her thighs, and shouts, "Use your tongue for this." No, there's no coming back from that.